Welcome to the day in history for May 18th. Today is Mount St. Helens. I'm pretty sure that since I started Days in History, 2 years ago it was on a Saturday. Last year it was a Sunday, so finally we get to do Mount St. Helens. Now, today's day in history is the day that Mount St. Helens erupts in Washington, killing 57 people and causing over $3 billion in damage. Now, the big idea for today is that the earth waits for no one. The earth doesn't really care that we're sitting here, and so the natural phenomenon, the natural geological things that happen, they just happen. They don't raise their hand and ask permission. It just is what it is. And we see a lot of that with a lot of the natural disasters, the tsunamis, the storms, all that sort of stuff. The earth's not being mean. That's just what the earth does. We just happen to be living on it. So I'll let you write this down. All right, let's go. We are in Washington. We're in Washington State. We could drive there. We could probably take a field trip to Mount St. Helens. That's how close it is. It is right down there. I've been there before. My dad actually worked at Mount St. Helens right after the eruption, which is pretty cool. But let's take a closer look. Now, Mount St. Helens is in southwestern Washington. It's in a nice, national park. It's pretty cool. I haven't been there since, I was probably your guys' age the last time I went there. I need to go there one of these days. But it's right in our neighborhood. Now, also in our neighborhood, a little bit bigger neighborhood, are these other volcanoes. Look at these volcanoes. There are a lot of them. We got Mount Baker, Mount Rainier, we got Mount St. Helens, we got Mount Hood, Mount Jefferson, we got Crater Lake, we got Mount Shasta. These are all mountains that go down through the Cascades. Now, these mountains are all part of a bigger geological feature called the Ring of Fire. Now, we've talked a little bit about this, but it really has to do with tectonic plates. Now, the Earth is created with these different plates, almost like a broken eggshell. And as the Earth turns, these plates move around. Now, the liquid iron solid partial core of the Earth is moving, the magma is moving, the mantle is moving. The entire Earth feels like it's not moving unless you felt some of the recent earthquakes. There was one just a couple days ago in Green Acres that shook our house. It was crazy. So sometimes we forget that we're actually sitting on a floating plate, but we are. And when those plates meet, well, sometimes some pretty big reactions happen. So, Ring of Fire, great research topic. Now, Mount St. Helens, before the eruption, was an absolutely gorgeous place. Well, just look at this picture. Pretty nice, right? You got a nice lake, beautiful snow-capped mountain, pretty nice. Now, I can't even imagine what it looked like before, but these pictures really show how gorgeous of an area it was. And that's why it was a natural park and people had to go camping there. There was tourism, lots of boating, all kinds of stuff. There was also a lot of lumber and some other industries there as well. Now, before Mount St. Helens erupted, it's not like it just happened and we didn't know it. Scientists and geologists had been predicting an eruption for a while. They had been watching the signs. They've been noticing what we call seismology reports with little earthquakes. There were even these cracks forming in the side of the mountain. And the scientists said, hey, we need to make the zone around Mount St. Helens bigger because if it erupts, it's going to kill people. We need to increase the size of the safety zone. I actually found this Spokesman Review article from, I believe it's April, the beginning of April, that says we need to make zones bigger to keep the people safe. Look, and there's even one down there that says school holds volcano drill. Could you imagine having a volcano drill? Yeah, so they were concerned. Unfortunately, they didn't increase the size. There was some pushback by the lumber industry that wanted to keep cutting down trees, and some of the tourism around there didn't really want it to be closed down because then their businesses would close. And also I think some people they've been seeing this volcano look the same forever. And then all of a sudden people are like, hey, it's going to blow up. You should probably move away. People are like, whatever. They didn't really want to believe it. Unfortunately, humans have a history of not believing what they don't want to believe sometimes. But the science said it's probably going to blow up. And you know what happened? It blew up. Now, let's talk about the volcano itself real quick, though. So these are called stratovolcanoes or composite volcanoes, and they all look fairly similar. These are what we would call an iconic volcano because they all have this similar cone shape. If you ask a kindergartner to draw a volcano, they're probably going to draw this because this is the most recognizable type. Mount Fuji, Mount St. Helens, some of the big ones in Hawaii, these all have that cone shape, and they are all formed in a similar way. Now, this is a really good image of how Mount St. Helens works, and this is also the case for many other stratovolcanoes. Now, what's pretty cool is that if you look here, you can see the tectonic plate going under the plate where the cascades are or where the land is. And as it goes under, it creates friction, heat, and some of the water from the ocean goes down there and it heats up and it helps liquefy and move around some of the soil. You know, we could do like a whole 30-40 minute, probably entire day presentation on how these things work. But in a nutshell, as that plate goes down, it creates heat and friction, which then makes some of the pockets of magma come up and come out of the volcano. Yeah, research topic. This is a good one. Now, here is an iconic image of Mount St. Helens exploding. Most of the time, when you think of a volcano, a composite or a stratovolcano exploding, we think of these straight up and out, right? Mount St. Helens was different. It had these cracks forming in the side and a huge amount of pressure built up. It actually blew off the entire side of the mountain. Can you even imagine? I mean, think back to those pictures that we saw earlier, where it just had this nice, beautiful snow-capped mountain, and then all of a sudden, just like, boom, totally explodes. Crazy. Now, this is another very iconic set of photos. Somebody was snapping pictures, and you can see in the first photo, it looks normal, and then you can actually see the entire side of the mountain just slide off. And then once that slides off, it released all the pressure down there, and it just erupted like crazy. Now, something else that was absolutely amazing had to do with the pyroclastic flows, which is a mix of superheated water and liquefied ash and rock. It's like the most deadly landslide you could possibly imagine. And this thing just swept across the landscape, flattening trees and pretty much destroying everything in its wake. If you just look at some of these, like this used to be a forest. This was a living, breathing, beautiful forest that you could walk through. Now it's a flattened disaster zone. It just flattened those trees like somebody set up toothpicks and then swiped your hand across it. Pretty crazy. Now, the amount of ash and dust that came out was tremendous. It let so much of this stuff into the atmosphere. It covered huge portions of the United States. Spokane got a ton of ash. Ritzville just got buried. Yakima, and massive amounts. Now, ash is not it's not light. It is very heavy. Roofs would collapse. It would clog up all kinds of what we call HVAC, or like the air systems in buildings. It was pretty bad. And a lot of the damage that was caused, a lot of the cost was to repair the damage from all of this dust. Now, this is a pretty crazy image, but you can see this dust cloud just like coming towards you. It reminds me of last week's Day in History on the Dust Bowl, right? These giant dust storms, except this is volcanic ash. It's almost like little particulates of glass that are just floating through the air. It's nasty, nasty stuff. You breathe this stuff in, it is not good at all. Now, this picture really shows you how much ash there actually was. I don't know exactly where this picture is from, but you can imagine this car, right? A normal car. It's from the 80s, obviously. You can tell by the shape, but it's buried. Like, that's a lot of ash. Like, we're not joking around. The areas around Mount St. Helens just got dumped on. Now, here's another good image. This is a geologist standing on a new level. Like, this was a road. Look how those signs are like, what, 7-8 feet tall? That's crazy, right? Look at that. Now, I can only imagine what it was like to be near this and to see it happen. Now, I was 2 years old when this happened. Some of your grandparents were old enough to remember. Some people were old enough to be so fascinated by this that they became geologists. But it is just absolutely fascinating that these things happen. They say this is one of the biggest volcanic explosions in like 32,000 years for this area. That's pretty crazy. So, I do know that there's a really cool NOVA episode called Back from the Dead, Mount St. Helens. Has a lot of good facts. I haven't checked to see if you can watch it right now, but if you can, I'll put a link in our Teams page. And everybody, have a good day. Thanks.